Okay, this is the third and final video in the series. We got our remote flash with OpenTX hooking up to our Express LRS. And of course, links to the previous videos will be in the description below as well as the resources and stuff I use to program my flight control board in this video as well in the reference guide. I did take off the top plates here so that I can access the USB more easily. And we're just going to jump right into it of how I went through and configured this so that it works with the Express LRS. And one thing to note is your receiver does have to be on UART1 with this flight control board. Um, it's the DSM that is enabled on UART1, but it isn't enabled on the other UARTs, so you do have to make sure that you're on UART number 1 for this whole configuration to work successfully. But we're going to share the screen here and get right into it. So when you first connect your board, you're going to be in the data section here. And you can see that when I move my drone, I can get these stuff to move as well. So the first thing you want to do on this flight control board specifically, we're going to go into the full parameters listing, and then we're going to look for a parameter called compass enable. And why we're looking for this is we're actually going to be turning this off. This flight control board that I am using actually does not have a compass, so this option isn't applicable in our situation. But after you turn this off, you're going to want to save a file, and you just want to create basically a default of all the basically the configurations that are default on the drone, just in case you mess something up as well. Okay, then the first thing that you want to change after you get that configuration saved is we're going to start changing stuff. The first thing I changed is the battery. It's called battery amp here. And I set this one to 55.9 for this drone. I do not remember the defaults for these, but I did change this one to a 55.9. The second one's going to be your battery capacity. I changed this all the way up to 500,000. That's just the battery I'm using. If you have a different milliamp hour battery, this is where you're going to enter that configuration in as well. And you just want it to match the battery you are using. The next one we want to change is mode battery volt. And we're going to change the max and the min. This is also correlating to if you're running 4S or 3S. So I'm running 4S. So a max 4S battery is going to be 16.8 volts, where the minimum is going to be 13.2. This is about 3.3, I think. Yeah, I think it's about 3.3 per cell to get 13.2. And then the next thing we're going to want to change after we change both of these is we're going to go and change our battery CRT. And if I'm going to list down below as well in the video description all these parameters basically I am changing. That way, if for some reason you can't read my words on my screen, you can see those in the description below. So I changed this to 14 volts. This is where the battery basically triggers a critical battery failsafe. And 14 is just pretty low for 4S battery, so I'm going to leave it at that. Of course, if you're flying 3S, you're going to want to change these parameters to match a 3S battery as well. Okay, the next one we're going to change is a battery FS. And this one's going to be the CRT ACT, and I changed this to 1. So when it basically fail-safes, it's going to just try to land. And as well as the low, I changed that to 1 as well. And this is just going to make it so it comes in, basically lands when it gets low. I unfortunately do not have a GPS on this drone currently, so I cannot do a smart return to home. So we're going to leave it there. Next one we're going to change is our bat low voltage. And so here it is, bat low. I changed that to 14.4. So this triggers a low battery failsafe basically at 14.4 volts, which is, that's just a good voltage for your 4S. You aren't going to really be flying under there anyways. So next one I am changing as well. It's going to be a servo underscore BLH auto. And this you have to enable if you're doing BL Heli pass through. And so with the ESCs, you have to select this BL Heli auto so that you can have pass through features on your ESCs. That way we can connect them to the configurator and flash them as well. And so next thing you want to change on this, I'm going to change the RSSI type. And I changed this to 3 because it's a receiver protocol because I am running Express LRS, so I changed that to 3. I will have linked down below in the description basically a guide if you are using the default FS i6X remote with the default receiver that it does come with as well. So if you want to set up your receiver that way, you can do that. Next thing I'm going to change is a flight mode on a core, the flight mode channel. And I changed this all the way up to 12 because Express LRS supports up to 12 channels basically. So I bumped that all the way up to 12 so I can utilize my whole entire controller using the Express LRS. And so if you're using Express LRS, you're definitely wanting to change this up to 12 as well. So you definitely want to write parameters as you go throughout this, but we're going to go to the full parameter tree, and we're going to go down to servo a serial 1. This is where we wired up the receiver, and this is what we're going to want to change the receiver to. We're going to want to change the protocol to 23, band to 115. This is what you're going to want to set if you are running Express LRS on a serial 1. But the next thing we are going to do is back in the parameters list, and we're going to change these for our ESCs again so that we still can access our motors. And that's going to be a motor PWM type. And you have to change this to 6 so that it's seen it as a DJI 600 for this configuration. We are running the DJI 600 ESCs. So you have to change this, otherwise the ESC configurator right here, that I'll link down below as well, this will give you problems. So you really got to make sure to change that to recognize that it is a DJI 600 and it's not doing a bi-directional or a one-shot thing with your ESCs. And then the last thing we have to change in here before we go into our configurator is a servo D shot. ESC, and we're going to change this to 2. So we aren't using none. We are using a D-Shot ESC, and we aren't using the KISS, which is option 1. So option 2 is BL Heli S. So that is what I have connected here. And then after you write parameters again and you saved all these settings, you're going to basically connect to here and flash whatever ESC software you want onto your ESCs. I'm not going to go over the ESC configurator because it is pretty simple. So I'll let you guys do that, or you can look up another video. But basically you just have to select which one you want and go from there. I am actually using Blue Jay for my ESCs, so that it works nice, and I heard it's a lot better than BL Heli S, and I have always stuck with, I use the old firmware for BL Heli, so now I'm actually, and now I'm flying KISS on my 5 inches, so now I'm going to try out the Blue Jay on this guy and see how well these ESC protocols do. But the next parameter we're going to look for on this, at this point too, we actually can go through our setup guide. So we're going to want to select our frame, which is a X, and then we want to go and basically calibrate all these. Compass, we disconnected. You want to make sure you calibrate your radio so that your radio basically moves and you can see that all your stuff in here moves properly. And if you set your receiver up the way I did, this will work perfectly and you should have no problems with it. Servo outputs, you can change your different motors of which position your motor is in if you need to in this page. But on ESC calibration, this is what I did as well. I did switch this to a D-Shot 600. I believe this was actually left normal at the start, and I don't touch the bottom section. I believe after you calibrate it, all these numbers automatically change themselves. So you're basically going to calibrate ESCs. What you're going to have to do, and this is not in this list, is disconnect everything, and then you're going to want to plug in your remote and turn on your remote and leave your throttle at full, as high as possible. And then you're going to plug in your battery, which should automatically do a ESC calibration, and then you should be okay from here. If this does not work, which it actually was not working for me in the configurator, we have a ESC calibration, and you actually can force this into an ESC calibration mode so that you do not have to basically worry about anything. So what I would recommend is put it on number 2, the value, start up an ESC calibration mode regardless of throttle. And then all you'll have to do is plug in the battery, and it should calibrate all your ESCs for you. In flight modes, I basically just leave it on stabilized. I haven't set up anything to switch the modes, so I just leave it on stabilized. On failsafe, I just have this on land, and radio enable always return to home, which should just be enable always land because I actually don't have GPS on here, so it won't do a return to home. Okay, so after you get everything here set up, you do want to test your motors. Make sure all your motors are spinning in the correct order, and basically just make sure that everything's talking from here. And then one of the things I changed is in the parameters tabs again, I'm going to go with the RC5 and then go into the options. And for this, I set this to 154, which is the arm and disarm with air mode. I have noticed that the air mode is a lot higher than just a normal arm, but for now I'm going to keep it on an air mode configuration because that is what I'm used to on my other drones. And I do like the air mode feature as well. That way, when you're at zero throttle, your drone does not fly out of the sky. You do have control over your aircraft while it's still in the air, basically. But I did go ahead and change my motor spin. That's what we're looking for. And I did change this down, so I changed the arm to 0.08, changed the min to 1, and then 0.1, and then the max to 0.55. This just allows basically the motors to spin at a slower pace than if they were just full max speed. Because I've noticed that they spin awfully fast when I have armed it, so this is why I did change it down. It may be good just to leave them how they are as well. And then what I did as well is I went back into startup and then I did the initialize parameters setup. Basically, you want to put in here that your size is a 10-inch drone, battery count 4, and your chemistry is a lipo, and then you just hit calculate, and then basically write to ESC. I'm not going to write this to ESC because this is actually the next thing we're going to change, and that is the motor thrust hover. And I changed this to .2.5. That is just what other people have recommended to me, so that's just where I'm going to leave those for now. And then I did set up a motor emergency stop on one of my switches as well, so that if something does happen or something's going crazy, I flip that switch, everything shuts off. And what I'm going to do now is that I configured everything on the drone. We're just going to hit load from file, and then we're going to label this backup 2, my second backup I'm doing. Oh, I hit say I hit load. Yeah, I hit save, and then backup to save. There we go. Now we can see that everything's in here. And then what we can do as well is we can go ahead and plug in our battery now that we have all our settings changed. And we can basically arm the drone, and we can see here, it looks right now that my battery's below arming thing, but you do want to make sure that it will arm. And then after you make sure it arms, then you're good to go from here, and you are all set to go do your first test flight. So there you guys go. This completes the video of the whole setup configuring in the S500 to the FS I6X using Express ELRS and Mission Planner using RDO Pilot. So it concludes our video series.